What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Average Money Podcast. Today we have another guest episode, and it's a big one, and one that I am super excited about. Today we're going to be sitting down with Scott Rieckens, and he is well known, I think, in the fire community for his book, Playing with Fire, which I've done reviews on. I talk about all the time. He also followed it up with the documentary, but I really want to sit down with him because I know him more as just a stand-up guy. He is an average guy, just like JJ and I, and has things to offer us in this space of not only just fire, but in filmmaking, entrepreneurship. Really, really great conversation that I know that he has to offer us, and he can also bring us some value and some things outside of what you might have read in the book, which we will dive into a little bit. If you are new to the podcast, my name is Brad Finn. I am joined every week, as you know, with JJ Buckner. JJ, how you doing, bud?
Doing good, man. Looking forward to today's episode. Excited to talk to Scott, hear his story, do a little bit more deep dive of kind of how he's gotten to where he is now. It's gonna be a good one.
Yeah, Scott, welcome. And I have to just mention right off the bat, Scott, like the first time we met, and this was kind of like the baseline for our relationship, I think, because I came down to Richmond to see the documentary, and you had known that I had done the review on YouTube and things like that. But what blew me away was I was leaving the room, and I don't know if you remember this, but I was leaving the room and you kind of tapped me on the shoulder like, hey, I need to speak to you. Like, I want to thank you for the video and for the support and things like that. And that set the baseline of, wow, this guy is a good stand-up guy. And that led into an evening of drinking, and I really got to know you. And what was it like? I just want to start with, like, what was it like going around the country with the documentary and the movie and seeing and having those interactions with people that had supported you and you know, that you knew that you were impacting?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. Brad, I do remember that night. And we were just talking about it off camera with JJ. I remember meeting JJ too at FinCon. And so it's been kind of fun to realize how much did stick, thank goodness, because it was an absolute whirlwind. But, you know, for me, that particular time in my life when I met you, Brad, we were going through a 12-city screening tour. And gosh, it feels weird to talk about now post-COVID. But we were running around the country and supporting the film in these little theaters. And it was an incredible experience. It was a way to bring the fire community together, or people who might be interested in the fire community, or people who have no idea and somehow figured out that this film existed, which those were always my favorites. But this is an opportunity to get people in the same room and to see a film about this subculture on a big screen in a theater. I mean, it can't be understated how amazing of an experience that is, and how important that can be to some people. We ended up showing in over 200 theaters across the world. I think it was 6 different countries. And we had people from other countries like hitting us up constantly, like, I really want this down in South Africa. I really want this to show up in New Zealand. Why can't this be in Canada? And it's like, guys, I can't believe it myself, but guess what? Like, Canada, your country has a crazy rating system, and we aren't going to spend thousands of dollars to get our movie rated by the Canada CPAA or whatever it was called. Just for this little month or two stretch of theater screenings, when, gosh, guys, our northern brethren, we love you. We want to show this in the theaters, but that's just another wrinkle to, you know, a million different things we're dealing with here. And we're just trying our best. And so, yeah, I digress a little bit, but I want to set the stage for how gnarly that was. And so with all of that craziness swirling around, I did my best to stay on social and stay online to check in and see how people were receiving the film and what was being discussed, and if there were opportunities in those discussions. And I remember catching your video, and it was, I think, from what I could recall, like one of the first or one of the only YouTube reviews. And I thought, oh, that's so wonderful. And I could tell that you're amped on the project. And so that matters to me on multiple levels. From an entrepreneur standpoint, it matters to me because, you know, I'm going after essentially, like, I was subscribing to like the 1,000 True Fans mantra from Kevin Kelly, right? And so that meant a lot to me from an entrepreneurial standpoint. It also means a lot to me from a friend standpoint or from a human standpoint, because I sunk, 3 years of my life into this project. And if someone's going to take the time to, create a YouTube channel or do any kind of promotion whatsoever to help further our cause, like, I owe an immense amount of gratitude, to that effort. And the wildest part was take all that together and then zoom into that night in Richmond And you're talking about that little after party that we went to. And I walked into that room, and I'm not used to having that type of spotlight. And it's not like I'm famous or anything like that, but in that little moment, in that little bar, in that little town, medium-sized town, sorry, Richmond, it's you are kind of famous for a minute, and it's a lot to handle, because you recognize that there are like expectations that people have, because they have taken the time out to come that night, and part of that point might be for them to get to know you, because maybe they followed your project along this entire time and they're excited and they feel like they know you, and I want to give that right back. And yet it's really, really hard when you've got 200 people. And look, there were like 500 people that showed up to that particular event. That was an incredible event. And so I don't know how many people ended up to that after party, but like that was on the backside of talking to 50 people at the theater, trying to get through essentially like what forms a line for people to just wait to talk to you. And that's a weird feeling. And so I saw you in my peripheral, and I was talking to a few people who had similar instances of like, they've been following this project along and the whole thing. And so I want to talk to them too and give them my, the time of day as much as I can. But I saw you sort of hovering, and I was like trying to, make my way, and it just wasn't happening. So I finally just had to like interrupt the conversation, tap you on the shoulder, and be like, don't fucking leave, man.
No, you said as far as like being famous for a second, and I'm definitely not going to give anything from the book away. I want people to read the book. I hate when I listen to a podcast and I'm like, I don't need to read the book or see the movie. But I will say, like, it starts off, and you set the tone very early in the book. I want to read a quote right from the book. It says, guy in his mid-30s, sitting in traffic in a new but unremarkable car, drinking a cold brew from Starbucks, heading to work. Like, you were the average American guy doing the things that we're all doing. And the movie aside, I think people, what gets missed is, why you were able to put on the movie and do this production. Like, your identity is not playing with fire. Like, you're one of the fire, you're definitely a staple in the fire community, but you had an awesome skill set going into this, which allowed and gave you the opportunity to bring this to life and bring this to production. And you also mentioned the 1,000 True Fans, which is awesome. And in the book, you find out that you found out about the fire movement by listening to the Tim Ferriss podcast, and that led down to Mr. Money Mustache and all that things. But when were you at work with your skill set and you said, like, I now know something and I can use my skill set? People need to understand that filmmaking and entrepreneurship, that's like a big deal to you. And that's something that's your real true passion. Like, the movie and stuff was kind of a byproduct. And I want you to just talk a little bit about what you did before this, like the job that you quote quit, and why you thought you were able to make a book. Because so many people go the fire route, but we're not all writing books and doing documentaries.
Yeah. For me, the project was inspirational and aspirational. Like, I had wanted to do something bigger than the projects that I had been working on previously. So my background was in video production and content creation in general. I had been dabbling in the creative arts, let's say, for 10 years, between agencies, running my own video production company, and with a couple partners. And primarily our work was centered around brand work, commercial work, stuff like that. And so you always look aspirationally, like how could I take my skill sets and up the game? What's the next step? And there were sort of two things happening in that moment. So this was back in 2016, actually, when I was starting to feel this way. This was right around the rise of the YouTube personality, the YouTube, the Peter McKinnons, the Casey Neistats, all that. And I recognized that these guys, we were going to, what is that called now? Oh, NAB, National Association of Broadcasters Convention in Vegas. It's basically the FinCon of video production. But imagine, FinCon's like a small group of personal finance nerds. Video production is every single thing under the sun of video production. And so it's literally the Las Vegas Convention Hall, tens of thousands of booths, just products that you couldn't even imagine somebody would take the time to build. And it's fascinating. But I remember going there and feeling like our team has the skill sets necessary to do as good of work as these guys that are getting hounded at these conventions. who are starting to make a name for themselves via YouTube because they're getting products before everyone else and they're reviewing them. And we're all like chomping at the bit to understand the details of these products because they can elevate our game so that we can make, a better profit or get a better client or a better job, or we could now then do this. And then if we could, if we can get drone footage that's that stable, then we could get this project and blah, so on and so forth. So we were watching from an expert standpoint, trying to learn about the equipment. But in the back of my head, I'm going, yeah, but these guys, they're like completely jumping over the need for clients and sales and work at all. They're working with the Canons of the world, and they're making their living that way. This is really interesting. They're starting to really gain a significant amount of influence. And for me, it was kind of like a job security thing. I was sitting there going, man, like what's more secure than like your own personality? No one can do, can beat you on that. Like that's you. And so if you can establish that, that's really interesting. And we have the wherewithal and the know-how to create the content at a really high production level. So I started asking the guys, like, should we start a YouTube channel? Like, nobody wanted to do that. That's probably a little bit of imposter syndrome, a little bit of like, oh, that's beneath us. There's like a lot of that stuff going on.
Scott,
back in 2015, 2016.
When you say these guys, are these coworkers of yours or who do you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my partners, my employee, our little crew. And it's funny because I've talked to those guys since and like recently, and a couple of them have said like, I remember when we were having those
started a YouTube channel.
Dang it. Yeah. Yep. Oh, if only I knew, and so, I'm not trying to claim being an oracle or anything. It was pretty obvious. It was in front of us, but we were seeing it at the forefront. And so that was kind of, frothing around in my mind. And then I found this fire thing, and that was a completely different, this is where we go from aspirational to inspirational, where all of a sudden I'm realizing that, the reason why I felt like I needed job security was because I feel insecure. Why do I feel insecure? It's not because I don't have these skill sets and that I won't continue to earn money. It's because the money that I am earning is just flying out the door to fund this lifestyle that doesn't feel like anyone's at the helm. It feels like it's just being driven out of control. And I don't know how to deal with that. I don't know how to handle that because A, I'm super busy at work and have no time. This was the narrative in my head. B, I don't know how to do that. And I don't have any mentorship. I don't have anybody showing me the way. And to be frank, my peers are not helping. No one in my circles are sitting there going, hey, noticed you've been spending a lot of money. Come on over here. Let me talk to you about this. No one does that. So when I found the fire movement on accident, it was a revelation. And so that's where the inspirational comes from, because I instantly recognized that this thing has the potential to solve this massive problem that I know I'm not alone on, that I know so many people are afflicted with, that is, constantly like the barrage of consumerism, the barrage of marketing and advertising. I lived in that world. I was part of that problem, perpetuating that whole hamster wheel. And so I recognized that this could quite literally be a solution to from the top down to a lot of ails that were ailing my friends, my family, our peers, the country, the world. It's like, dang, this thing is powerful. And I'm a content geek, so I'm so immersed in this fire thing, and I'm going, it's just bloggers and a couple of podcasters? Like, if it's this big of a deal, how is there not more being discussed about this? Now, I realize now, I won't hold you to, in suspense. People don't like to talk about having to go frugal. Like, people are not stoked on that. They don't like the feeling they get. People feel guilt because of previous decisions they've been making. People feel somewhat defensive because they think they've got it figured out in a different way or something. There's all these emotions I didn't see coming because it's just not how my brain worked, and it's not the way I came into it. I came into it being like, oh, revelation here, revelation there, and I was open to being wrong, and I was open to learning because I knew I didn't know anything. And so I was unique in that way, probably. And so I understand it now, and thank goodness I got a crash course in how to talk about it and how to present it. But as I went through this, But at that time, that was my sense and that was my feeling, is like, this has to get out in the world. So inspirationally, I want to share this with the world. I can do that through creating some sort of, mega content piece, whether it's a series or a documentary or perhaps even a YouTube channel. And that's what I started exploring. And from there, like, just putting that thought into the universe, it didn't take long, because it was something that needed to be done. And I found out later it was actually already on its way in some way, shape, or form. The director that I ended up working with, Travis Shakespeare, who is a dear friend now, he had already had this idea, come to this, epiphany at Chautauqua, which is a big FI convention or international get together, that had been pretty new. He was like at the second or third one that had ever taken place, met a lot of people in our cast. And Travis Shakespeare, for people who don't know, is a BBC executive. And he is the executive producer of a pretty popular show called Life Below Zero. And so, he's someone who is a career Hollywood television executive producer. Like, that's a decent place to get to in Hollywood. It is in the upper echelon. And he's coming to these guys going, "Hey, I think we should make a documentary about this." And they were all like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And what ended up happening was series of unfortunate events. Top Gear, which was like the most popular show in the world or something like that, had some crazy thing happen with a host and it came crashing down. And so then BBC had to bring it over to the US. And BBC's like, "Oh my gosh, the most popular show we've ever had is now like burning in flames." So they did Top Gear America, and Travis had to take that on and get that going. And so his plans got derailed. And in the meantime, I find out about this stuff. I go on the Choose 5 podcast because those guys graciously had me on because they were really excited about this idea. And that kind of like made it so. I hadn't even really committed to the idea at the time, but got really excited about being on my first podcast ever and what that meant. And I had already had such reverence for Jonathan and Brad and the whole community. And I get on there and they introduced me as the guy that's going to do the fire documentary. It was kind of like, okay, like,
They threw you literally in the fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And thank goodness they did. But that's how it started. And so Travis just happens to hear this episode and starts feeling really bad. Like, who's this guy who's going to come and do my thing and all this and whatnot. And Travis is actually, he's a very educated, mature Zen, like he's got a lot figured out. And I've learned so much from him. But what he did was he went home, he slept on it, and he woke up the next day and thought, let me come at this from a place of positivity and graciousness and openness. Let me just reach out to him and see if there's a way I can help. Which was the right way to go, because what it really came down to, and he said later, I needed a you, and I was sitting there going, and I needed a you. It's like we needed each other to complete this, and so it worked out really, really well. All that to say, it was one of those things that, yes, I was not trying to come into the fire movement and become a fire influencer and be all things fire. I found something that was really working for me. And I happened to have a set of skills that I thought could contribute to the conversation in a meaningful way to try to get this idea out to as many people as possible, so that they at least have the ability to explore if a fire lifestyle could be for them, or if they can take bits and pieces from this, then maybe they can, improve their lives. And that's always been the vision from day one. And then, from there, the book deal was like out of left field. And I just happened to be a journalism major and had dabbled in writing for a long time. So that kind of made sense, and found an amazing person, Emma Petit, who is a person within the fire movement, but she's really just a great writer. And we teamed up and wrote that book. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, I guess we're doing this. And it's been one hell of a roller coaster. Oh my gosh.
It's awesome though, man. I mean, it's so crazy to hear that, and to hear just the people you got to work with too in the fire space. Cause as me, being kind of like a fanboy of the fire community, I mean, I remember stumbling upon Mr. Money Mustache's The Simple Path to Financial Freedom, or whatever the title is, at my workspace in my cubicle. And then I just went down this rabbit hole of finding Paula Pant, the Mad Fientist, all these blogs and podcasts. And I swarmed myself with as much information about the fire community as possible. I can't imagine how it would feel as coming from someone who is kind of a fan of the community, also a member of the community, but being able to work with these individuals that are kind of like the true speakers of the space. They're the OGs of the fire community. What did that feel like to be able to meet them, talk to them, film them? I mean, it must have been incredible.
Yeah, it was really interesting. So on one hand, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I'm living and talking to you right now, Scott.
No, don't. You are demonstratively misled, my friend. I can tell you there was a massive, massive amount of imposter syndrome going on with me from a fire standpoint, right? However, I used a specific shield to kind of get around that, which was I'm a filmmaker. And my original intent with the film was actually to go in as sort of like almost like a journalist and interview these guys to learn more for myself. So I was going in as a beginner, and that was kind of my shield. I'm not an expert here. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm asking you to share this with me, and through sharing it with me, it'll be a conduit to sharing it with everyone else. Taylor and I didn't come into this being like, okay, can't wait to get in front of the camera. I can't wait to share our money story with everyone. Like that's not really how it started. And so that was that shield that I had where I could just be the beginner. And that's still how I feel. And that's still who I am. And that's actually still what I think about when I'm building Playing with Fire is who is the beginner and how can I serve the beginner? Because that's who I am. So all the things you can imagine were happening. It's just like, I can't believe I'm jumping on a trampoline in Ecuador with Mr. Money Mustache. This feels weird.
My gosh. Dude, you were at Vicky Robbins' house, like on like this weird little island. Like that was like intense.
That was amazing. Yeah, exactly. I mean, to find Vicky in that state of just total bliss. Like I remember in between interviews, she and I were like laying on a deck sunbathing, like with our clothes on. But but I just remember her just being like, yeah, I've done this a million times, and I'm just thinking like, what am I doing here? How did this happen? This is unbelievable. I felt so much gratitude, though. I can't stress this enough. I remember picking up JL Collins from the airport, and I just like these types of memories that I have that were really, they go way beyond that. I remember playing ping pong with the mad scientist in a cockfighting ring, an old cockfighting ring in Ecuador, and being like, this is odd. This is weird. I like this. They're all just great people who, had similar feelings about getting that message out to people. They couldn't, they were a little bit different. They're cut from a different ilk than me in that they came to this stuff. A lot of them came to this stuff on their own accord through their own fruition and their sort of natural frugality and natural need to engineer and optimize. That's not who I am, but I still love them so much because they saw that and their frustration with it is, all of this stuff that everyone else is doing is so suboptimal. And I want to show you how to do it at the most optimized way. And thank goodness they have that sense. And that's how they came about it. So that, I just stand in awe every time I'm around them. And I still feel that way. However, they've all become, almost all of the cast, they've become dear friends. Like, we still connect with them. We've traveled with them. They've come to visit us, the whole thing. So it's in some respects, like, it's a work family and it's a wonderful thing. So we feel blessed because, our lives changed so drastically. It was such a 180 from a money standpoint, from a circle of friends standpoint, from, this new community that we found ourselves being a part of. It was pretty amazing. But, at the same time, it put me in a weird position because standing next to those folks, like on stage at FinCon or, in the film and in the book and, going on these podcasts, and then all of a sudden I'm on news channels and morning shows and all this stuff. And it was like, I had no experience in that. That wasn't something I was prepared for. I don't think anybody can really be prepared for. You just have to kind of bite the bullet and walk in and do your best. And, you have your good days and your bad days. All of that came down to, as I started to promote the film and the book, which was critical to its success, and it needed to be successful because we spent a pretty penny to make it. And the more successful it could become, the more it could fulfill the mission, which was ultimately to empower people to, improve their relationship with money. It became incumbent upon me to try to do my best to answer the questions and be this person. And it turned into this scenario where I am now to the interviewer, I am now a fire expert who's coming here to show you tips and tricks and strategies on how to do fire. And it's totally antithetical to the title of the whole project, Playing with Fire. Like I'm dabbling in it. I'm trying to figure this out. Is this for us? Like that was the whole idea, and by the way, it was for us and it still is for us in bits and pieces, but it's not a one size fits all, of course. We got our savings rate up in the high 70s during the film. That was all very real and we were miserable. And I think if we did that today, we'd be less miserable because we're more used to it. But at that time, it was the first time we got there. And so we were miserable. And And now we're probably hovering around 50%. And I say probably because I don't track it that often. I used to track a lot more when I was doing the project, but it's not something I want to spend my time on. However, there are times when I feel guilty and feel like I'm doing a disservice to all that work that we did put in when I'm not doing that. And so I'm still wrestling with those feelings. And so my point is I'm not a fire expert. I'm not. That's not who I am. It's not what I subscribe to. And the weirdest thing was we moved to a new place. And what was so wonderful about that was we got to reset our identity. So we didn't have to go through the pain of looking at all of our friends in the eye and going, we're now not spending money, but we still want to hang. So how are we going to pull this off? Because that's a tough conversation.
I got to throw you under the bus because we talked about that night that we first met, and I'm never going to be like, I knew that we were going to be cool when I drove you home from that after party, and we're walking through the parking lot. We're approaching my car, and you're like, you drive a $40,000 truck, bro, and you call yourself fire? And I'm like, and he's like, yo, sell your truck. And I'm like, but I love it. And he's like, nope, you threw me right under the bus with my truck. And now I still have a complex to this day. I was like, Scott, I paid it off. Like I paid it off. It's mine. I own it free and clear. And you're like, still, but what could you do? What could you do if you didn't have this truck? It was.
I don't regret that one bit. I just want to say out loud, I still
think I should sell my truck.
I still think you should sell your truck. I still hold true to that. There are certain pieces of the fire equation that I still get pretty staunchly defensive on and agree with wholeheartedly. So while I sit here and say I'm not a fire expert and all these things, it's not, I didn't necessarily identify with that. At the same time, it's a lot of the lessons that I picked up, I do feel strongly about, and sometimes I do catch myself realizing or sort of acquiescing to the idea that, okay, maybe I sort of am in some ways, this fire guy. The point is that all that came out of nowhere, even though I should have seen it coming. And so it was something to wrestle with because I saw myself as a filmmaker and an entrepreneur and someone who just wanted to help people. And next thing you know, I'm getting, just leveled on the financial independence subreddit, just people saying the craziest stuff about me. And that's a weird place to be. And then, one minute you're reading these like super negative comments that's all just made up crap that like is completely wrong. And you just get fired up inside like, oh my gosh, I need to set the record straight. I can't believe people read this and think this. I better get to typing. And then you realize about halfway through, the paragraph you've just spewed out that you can't write any of this and you have to delete it all. I can't tell you how many comments I've posted and then deleted after posting, trying to defend this stuff.
Welcome to the life of a YouTuber.
Yeah, geez, no kidding. What have you signed up for? But yeah, and then the next morning to have to get on like a major finance show, or be invited to New York Stock Exchange, and you're just like, what am I doing here? That's a pretty weird juxtaposition. So I've been wrestling with that over the last few months, and COVID has obviously done a lot for disrupting our lives and ruining some people's lives and ending some people's lives. And it's a horrible, horrible situation. And yet, obviously in all situations you can find positives and negatives. And in this case, it was really nice to be able to, without fear of ruining anything, just shut everything off. And that's what we did. I had just started this podcast and we were just off the heels of the digital release and everything was crazy. And I was completely burnt out. And Brad will remember I went vegan and stopped drinking and, I was doing everything I could to like get back to some semblance of equilibrium. And then this all hit. And so, that was an interesting phase. I ended up taking on a backyard project and just diving into that because I needed to shut my brain off and do something tangible for a minute. And it was really important for me to take that breath because I was about to be done. I was really close to just not caring about this at all anymore, walking away because I was so fed up and tired with feeling like this identity was being put on me. Seeing any kind of negative comment, it really hurts. And especially when it's, for the wrong reasons, like when people have these preconceived notions that, you do this to get known or to find influence and whatever. And I've already copped up and admitted to that. Yes, that was part of this in some way, shape or form, but it was in my mind, it was from a good place, it was like,
but who cares? But really though, what is wrong with finding influence and making a name for yourself? That's what everyone does in life. You want to succeed. You want to get ahead in life. See, that's one of the things that like I've learned from having a YouTube channel is some of these comments, like they obviously sting you, but now Brad knows. I'll answer my comments for like the first hour and then like I don't even look at them ever again, because later on as videos get older, that's where like new people start coming in that don't know you, and then the bad comments start coming up, and I don't even look at them anymore because I know they're not true or whatever they're saying is most likely wrong. So that's one thing that really grinds my gears is when people say that, like, why would you try to shut somebody down to try and have an influence, to try and better themselves, doing something that they love? I mean, you love trying to better yourself financially. Like I just do. That's one thing that it really does just drive me insane. And I don't even hear it from people on the internet, from like the keyboard warriors with their Cheeto stained pants living in mom's basement. I hear it from people.
Get him, JJ, get him.
Seriously though, like I hear it from people out in the real world that want to criticize people for doing something, like going back to entrepreneurship. When you were talking about, on the deck with Vicky Robin and in the cockfighting pit with the mad scientist playing ping pong, like that's so amazing. But you would have never been able to do that if you would not have taken that initiative, which is any entrepreneur knows this, to start something. And it takes people knocking you down. It takes people putting you in spots you don't want to be in. But that's entrepreneurship. You know what I mean? Like, so I do want our viewers to understand this, that not everything is sunshine and rainbows when you're going to start something new. But the fact, Scott, that you started something that you wanted to do, you took that initiative that 99% of people can think of the idea, but they never follow through with it. So props to you, dude, for pulling that off, because it's incredible.
And I'll butcher this Gandhi quote, but it's something along the lines of like, first they'll doubt you, then they'll laugh, then they'll criticize, then you've won. And I try and think about that a lot. And I will say this, I'm not going to give away where you ended up moving, but if you wanted to be known, you could have been known a lot more in your original place in Coronado, San Diego, and you moved to a place where you didn't move to a place where you're like, I want to be famous and I want to be here. And there is something I want to talk about that move, because there is a piece of the puzzle, and it's something that's dear to JJ and I as well, and that's family, because you didn't do this alone. And I think it's worth mentioning, you mentioned your wife Taylor a lot, but I think a lot of our listeners and a lot of people that get into this situation where they realize that we need to make a change, there's another half and there's a spouse. And I think the dynamic between you and your wife through this has been incredible because it was so genuine. Your wife, Taylor, and also you have a daughter, I think she just turned 5. That had to be a major piece. When you made this, one of the things that really hit home with me, because I am so family and I know you are, like seeing you go and spend time with your parents, and your father's a veteran, today's Veterans Day, so please thank your father for his service. But I want you to talk about that part of it, because this wasn't Scott can make a decision and Scott can travel for a year and figure this out. There was a huge piece that you had to bring in Taylor to this whole situation. You had a young daughter at the time. Jovi was probably like 2 or 3 years old, not even. And the very typical, like your wife was leasing a BMW and you had the boat club. And what do you say now to people that are in that kind of situation where they're like, I'm on board. I've read every Mr. Money Mustache. I've done all of these things. And the beautiful thing you did in the book, and like I said, I don't want to give the book away, but you guys talked about the 10 things that make you happy. And none of them had to do with money or where you were living. And you started this project and there was ups and there was downs. Like it was so genuine. I really love the freaking movie. I've seen it so many times, but I still, when you're sitting out at your father's house and you guys are out doing chores and you guys have that real conversation, it still tugs at my heartstrings. It's still like, it brings tears to my eyes, because there was that second family piece that is so important to not only the fire community, but just happiness and contentment in life in general. If you could you just talk about what it was like approaching your wife with this proposition, and maybe any concerns she had and how you guys worked through it and how somebody else might be able to work through that as well?
That's a great question. And I think where you have to start is thinking about your own money identity and the money identity of your significant other or the person you're trying to have a conversation with. Think about your own background. How do you feel about saving money? How do you feel about spending money? And then immediately recognize and have empathy for the fact that the person sitting next to you may not feel the same way, and that's okay. And really start to think about that other person. How do they feel about spending money, saving money, investing money? What's their goals for the future? All that kind of stuff. You want to really encapsulate that in your mind before you even start this conversation, because typically what I see is people they'll have the thing that they'll have the conclusion, the outcome that they want in mind as they start the conversation. Horrible idea. Really bad way to go about it. And the totally natural and normal way to go about it. And so you really want to think about your own money identity. And I got so lucky. I was so lucky to, the timing in which we went back to Iowa, and you had mentioned, doing chores with my dad, was inadvertently perfect, because I truly had the epiphany in that scene. Literally, I never thought, with all the production experience that I have, I never honestly thought that I'd be like having epiphanies and learning while the cameras were on. I kind of assumed it would be like semi-produced and yet totally reality, but semi-produced, because we kind of knew at least a little bit of like what a story arc could be. And to stand there and realize, it hit me so hard that my dad is frugal. My family from Iowa came from frugality out of necessity, and that is how I was raised. And so I suddenly realized, like, these feelings that I was having living in Coronado with my wife were predicated on like what I knew of the world and how we should be acting was all out of whack, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And that was when it hit me. And then, on the flip side, we had a lot of open conversations with Taylor's parents and her family as we were getting into all this stuff. And it was met with some serious trepidation in the beginning. And Taylor was fairly on board early on, because I had essentially given her the promise of an early retirement, which she got really excited about. She didn't realize what that would entail, I don't think, early on. And so, I was able to like hoodwink her a little bit on that one. But, as we were starting to go through that process, she started to uncover and realize sort of the way in which she was raised around money and spending and saving and all this stuff. And so we got really lucky in that we had a crash course in that inadvertently and unintentionally. And I recognize after the fact that had a huge role in us, kind of running down the same path and being able to have these conversations. So that's step one. Think about your money identity and think about your significant other's money identity. And then from there, have the conversation through happiness filters. So we did the top 10 happiness list. You can write your own playbook here, but as a starting point, I don't mind giving this away from the book or whatever. I don't even know where this came from. I think there's a book called The Happiness Advantage. And I want to say that it's like a small exercise in the back end of that book that we had read for other reasons that had nothing to do with money. And then that just kind of made sense. And so we applied it to this when it was like, let's write down the top 10 things that make us happy on a weekly basis, not a daily basis, because a daily is like little things of like, instant gratification and like, maybe some bad habits mixed in there. And we're not dealing with that. And then you look at monthly or longer and it's like, these are bigger, like aspirational happiness goals. And some of those will creep into the weekly, but we're not trying to go there. We're trying to go weekly because we think about our lives on a weekly basis, right? Like, what do you got going on this week? And so it's like, that kind of seems like the perfect time frame of like, in this week, what's going to make you happy? What's going to make you unhappy? And what's really also sort of creepily, no, not creepily, it's like subvertly perfect for this FIRE conversation is that on a weekly basis, you don't usually have intentions to spend like big buckets of money. And so it's a bit of a trick. But the idea is that in that week, you're going to spend money on some food. You're going to spend money maybe on like a shopping thing here and there. You might, get some coffee, like some exercise, some friendships, some family time. That's really what it's all about. And that's really what life's all about, where you're going to find the most happiness anyway. So it's a really nice way to sit down with a significant other and open up the conversation on the idea that we're coming at this from a standpoint of trying to get happier, not less happy, happier. How are we going to do that? And so you kind of, the whole idea is at the end of it, I don't mean to give it away, but typically you'll find that people will see that the happiness comes from things that don't cost a lot of money. Now you're ready to open up your budget, right? Now you're ready to go, okay, I recognize based off of our happiness list that is fairly mutual, but at least mutually respected, that I don't now need to go and buy that thing, or I should look hard at whether I need to own this thing because it's not on my list. So for anybody listening who plans to use these tactics to talk to their significant other, don't tell them this part of it.
Yeah, right.
Just go along with the system. But what that's what we've found to really work well. And we've heard a lot, honestly, like a lot of emails back from people saying that this was a fantastic solution for them, that they hadn't quite cracked that code. And it, to me, the most elegant solutions are always the simplest ones. And it's a really simple little equation, but it really makes sense as a starting point to those conversations. And I'm not saying that it's a fix all and everything's going to go smooth from there, but and it hasn't. I'll give you an example. Taylor, she agreed to get rid of the BMW, but I had to lead by example and get rid of the boat club. Oh, woe is me. I'm not whining here. But what ended up happening was when we got the Honda CR-V, I cannot tell you how much she hated that car. She despised that vehicle and it never went away.
You could tell in the movie. That was one of the parts I laughed out loud, which was like,
that was very real. And it never, ever changed. We owned that car for 2 years. It never changed. She hated that car. She would spit on it if she could. Like she hated pulling up to any event where our friends were. She wanted to like duck underneath it. I mean, and I loved that thing, man. It was just like, it was a representation of the hard work that we had put in. It was a representation of the good decisions that we were making. And honestly, it gave me a sense of pride and like and ownership over our money and over our our future. That's what that car represented to me, and it's not what it represented to her.
Do you miss the boat club 3 years later? Be honest.
I don't know, man. I know you want me to say yes, but I don't.
No, I don't. I'm curious. Like I live by the water, so like I'm a big I'm an ocean boat guy, and I know in San Diego and reading the book, I know that was really important to you. And you talked about that quote last trip on the boat before you gave up the boat club.
Yeah.
But now in retrospect, 3 years later, what I guess not do you miss it, but was it as monumental piece of your life as you thought it was 3 years ago? If I wanted to make a sacrifice and sell my truck in 3 years, am I going to miss my truck?
You mean when you right. Make that sacrifice?
When I sell my truck.
No. I mean, I shouldn't have been so judgmental about your truck, but it was a bit of a surprise because that's a cherry truck. I mean, that's a good looking truck, but I can't not see the depreciation and the opportunity costs that you got going on there while you're also trying to work towards fire. So for me, that will never shake out. Once you've reached financial independence, have at it.
And go buy that truck. Yeah.
For me, the boat club, man, it was like, I don't regret a day of it. Honestly, it was a lot of, I can tell you a lot of, regrets that we do have financially over the years. Now that we know, I wish I knew then what I know now kind of thing. But with that experience that we were able to have on the water in that beautiful city and that beautiful area, I mean, I don't regret it. But do I miss it? I mean, anytime I'm on a boat, it's a good thing. My dad's in the Navy, or was in the Navy. He's retired Navy commander. And, at the end of the day, like, I'm sort of half fish, I mean, my dad was a SEAL. I'm a SEAL pup. I mean, that's for real. And so it's in my blood. I have to be around water in some way, shape or form. But at the end of the day, like we've got some stand-up paddle boards. We've got 100 lakes around us. We're out in the water as often as we can get. And it satiates, that. With San Diego, it was like you wanted a boat because if you go to the beach, there's a million other people at the beach. If you're trying to get on, you're surrounded by water, but you can't be on it. To me, that just felt a little antithetical. And like, when you're at the beach, that's nice and everything, but there are great white sharks that happen to prowl just offshore. And like, it's just not the best case scenario for a swimmer. You're a little bit of a sitting duck. And so like being on a boat was nice because you could like lounge and you could go fishing and you could, really experience the Pacific Ocean and all of its wonder without feeling like you're going to get eaten in half. And so, it was sort of a practicality thing more than anything. But anyways, the point is I made money sacrifices. Taylor made money sacrifices. And the point is that like, whether or not I derive value from those sacrifices and see them as positive, and whether she sees them as negatives, that's okay, as long as we continue to work towards these goals together, and we can have that give and take. To be completely honest and open here, we got rid of that Honda CRV, and it was still running just fine. From a fire perspective, we should have kept it, but we had an opportunity to upgrade a little bit. We got a Lexus 450h with 100,000 miles on it. And it is an upgrade. Taylor loves, the little pieces of luxury. She loves how she feels good in the car, and she's not worried about what people are thinking, all that crap that matters to her that doesn't matter to me at all. And yet it's still a fantastic vehicle. We got it at a great price. We're going to keep it for a really long period of time. So we're not going to eat a bunch of depreciation. I'm not going to worry too much about the opportunity cost. Yeah, a couple grand here and there. I'm willing to separate with that for my wife's happiness. And you have to get to that place, right? So I don't agree with people that go, super hard and fast at it and have no flexibility in their journey, because, oftentimes that's it's got a higher chance and probability of leading to unhappiness than it does to happiness. And ultimately, that's what this whole thing has ended up becoming about. It's not really about money. It's like, you have to understand money and you have to own money as best you can, so that at least in our case, so that we could get to the real work, which was working on ourselves and working on our happiness.
You had Grant Sabatier at the screening in New York that I was able to go to, and I know you formed a good relationship with him, and I've talked to him as well. And one of the great things that Grant talks about, because he was also one of the early FI people, and he wrote a great book. But one of the things I've heard him say over and over again is that while achieving FI, his life was miserable, that he had the blinders on so tight that he didn't realize what it was like to live. And he essentially lost those 3 years of his life being so in the spreadsheet. And I think what you just said was, you got a new car to get outside the spreadsheet, you can't be 100% efficient, because that's not what your life needs to be about. And the value that your spouse had and bringing joy to your family and your daughter and things like that. So incredible. And I think now, I kind of want to shift because I'm taking up so much of your time, but since the book, it's been a couple of years since you've finished, quote, production. And I want people to read the book, and I want them to see where you actually decided, because that's part of the suspense and the cliffhanger of the book. How's it been since then? I remember when I saw the movie, at the end, they were very clear that you weren't financially independent, and that was still something you were working on. And like you'd mentioned, that the book was quote, playing with it, like you were figuring it out. What's life like now? What's going on right now in your life? What are the projects that you have seeking, both in filmmaking, entrepreneurship, as well as playing with fire? What's going on right now?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. And we're doing our best to be balanced right now. COVID definitely it made some significant changes in all of our lives, and in Taylor and I's fire journey, with our strategies around money, our strategies around our time and how we spend it. It completely changed all of that. And so, I'll just go back and say, for the last 6 months, it's been a season of introspection, of change, of fear, of resilience. There's all that going on, right? And I feel really blessed and grateful that we've managed to stay healthy. Our family, we've had some members that have actually contracted the virus, and so far so good. And so we just feel really lucky, and we're going to continue to do what we're doing to stay safe. And I just hope anyone who's listening, who's dealing with that kind of shit and it feels down and all the things that can be going on with the craziness of our lives these days, just make sure you spend as much time and effort as you can on your own personal health, both mental and physical. I can't stress that enough. But, I've tried to take this opportunity to work as hard as I can on the mental side, and making sure that what I'm spending my time doing into the future is what I want to be doing, and what's good for me and my family. And I feel really excited about the future of Playing with Fire and the work that I'm working on there. I wasn't very excited about it for a while there. So it feels good to kind of have my old buddy back in a lot of ways. I got completely burnt out, and I've sort of had the time to dust that off. And so what we've got coming up is, I have been asked repeatedly for stickers. Everybody loves the stickers that we created. So I have created these little these little baggies of stickers, and we're going to be selling those pretty soon, getting those up. That whole e-commerce thing is not the easiest nut to crack. So been working on that. I found an awesome partner company to sell some t-shirts and like not have to be a part of the inventory and all that stuff. So we're gonna have some fun swag, some fun fi swag. I want to lean into that a little bit because I love design, and I think it's design for all intents and purposes may be lacking in this community a little bit. So we're gonna bring a little swag to the fire world, and hopefully people can wear that stuff loud and proud, and that creates conversations. So that's kind of the goal there. But the thing I'm most excited about is we've been building these sets of tools, and we just recently built a used car comparison tool. And what it does is it shows you a heat map of a specific reliable car. We pulled like 30 cars that are essentially the most reliable cars you can buy on the market. And it shows you a heat map for each of those cars of where they are the most expensive and the least expensive across the country based off of, we basically pulled data from Craigslist to understand like where they're cheapest and where they're most expensive. So that's the heat map. So you can find the cheapest car of maybe the model you might be looking for if you're a big fan of like trying to decrease your car spending, Brad. And then also, it does more things. So it also, you can input your data on like your own gas prices, your insurance levels, like all this stuff. And you can actually see the total cost of ownership of that vehicle. And it includes your depreciation rate. So it's like a really, really powerful tool to see like what is the most efficient car I can buy, or if I'm going to get a different car because it's not the most efficient, like what's that going to do to my pocketbook, like for real, like on the long term. So that's really, really fun. So it's cost to drive basically. So it's this really powerful tool. It's completely, unique and proprietary. We've never seen anything like it. And we're really excited to get out. It's live now, but we haven't really promoted it yet because we've got a couple other tools coming. We built this awesome credit card comparison tool, which is literally helped myself decide what I'm going to do. And then we've got a couple other ideas for tools cooking up. And once I got back in the groove and got really excited and got to brush myself off, the ideas started flowing. And our retirement calculator, lo and behold, just tends to do really well on Google. We got real lucky, so number one on like fire calculator, and it's even ranking in retirement calculator. And it's like, oh, that's really cool. And it's used, and I see it used a lot. And that's really exciting because that means people are interested in figuring out, what they're, where they're at in their FI journey. And that brings me happiness. But I started thinking about that, and it's like, wouldn't it be awesome to reverse engineer for a beginner? If they were making X amount of money and they were spending X amount of money, wouldn't it be cool to use the tool to like reverse engineer a budget so that it can prescribe like a balanced budget for someone if they want to reach a certain percentage of savings? So like, I make $100,000 a year as a family, and I want to reach a 50% savings rate. What should I spend money on? Like, how much money should I spend on the various items of my life? Awesome. And so we could reverse engineer that real easy for you through a formula and be like, you should be spending about $1,000 on housing and about $500 on your cars, and like, and then you can work out the details later. But what a cool starting point to then go into personal capital or Mint and start building your budgets and get on your path. So like, stuff like that just doesn't exist. It's almost frustrating that it doesn't. We've got a chance to build some of that stuff. So I'm really excited about that. I've got a whole beginner's course built out. And then what I'm doing right now is I'm going through all of the interviews from the film. And I'm pulling out all the little nuggets that didn't hit the film, but that can be used for like statement thought fodder for the course and also for YouTube. So like, I'm going through that to find like what would be really helpful just for the course and what would be helpful just in, sort of in general, and sort of mix those two. And then hopefully kind of bundle the whole course together. Like, hey, like if you watch this movie, read this book, and then take this course, like you're going to be on your way to fire. That's like ultimately what I think may be missing out there, or something that I can provide at least uniquely, is that, here's how you can get on this path. And so that's what we're working on now. And then I am going to be reprising our podcast with a little bit different twist. The coolest thing about podcasting in my mind is it gives you an opportunity to have really meaningful conversations with people that you're not just going to schedule a conversation to have that, to do that on a weekly basis with anyone, with just anyone. And it gives you a chance to maybe, reach out to people that you wouldn't even have the opportunity to talk to otherwise. And so, that brought so much value to me when we did that from the documentary standpoint and the book standpoint, that it's a way for me to continue that without having to write another book or do another documentary, which I may or may not ever do again. So, I'm excited about that.
definitely those tools and everything else. We're going to link everything. I got my copy of the book. I'm going to link a link to the copy of the book as well. I don't know off the top of my head, you know better than me, where can we rent the movie? I know it was supposed to go to Netflix and we don't have to get into that, but you still can get access to the film. To anybody that's listening, I recommend reading the book first. And I will tell you this too. My wife, through all this, I've always been the financial person, but when she heard me laughing out loud reading the book, this was actually the first money book that my wife even read. So for those husbands out there or wives or women, like, this was a great book. She loved it as well. So read the book before watching the documentary if you can, but where can people rent it and watch it at home right now?
Yeah, appreciate it. The book, just to really clarify real quick, it's on Amazon. You can get it like Barnes & Noble and all the other places. You just Google it. But I also did the audiobook. So if you're not big into reading, but you like listening, I actually read the audiobook, and Taylor makes an appearance as well. She reads her pieces in the book. So kind of a fun little audiobook. So I would recommend that. And then that's on Amazon. That's the best place to get it. As far as the movie is available on Amazon Prime. It is available on iTunes, Google Play, and Vimeo. And so any of those options, they're fantastic. Fantastically easy options to just watch it. Obviously you have to rent it. And ultimately, once we break even on the film, which, we still got some distance, but it'll just take time. Then at that point we'll have much more flexibility to, get it out maybe free, try to, figure out fun ways to put it out. But ultimately I still would love to have it on Netflix, because I can put it out there for free. It still doesn't mean that it's going to get a ton of traction and a lot of people will see it. Right. It's a matter of, if it's on Netflix, then it's getting put in front of hundreds of millions of people, and then it has the potential to go big. So, that's kind of still the goal. And just because we got a no from them doesn't mean it's a no forever, because they change their tactics and their strategies so often. And we've seen it time and again, like the minimalism documentary, they got a no. And it wasn't until they hosted a theater tour, which was, marginally successful and in terms of movies, but hugely successful in terms of independent documentaries, that the people they were working with knew somebody at Netflix, and they were like, hey, Netflix, they've done really well in the theaters. And they're like, all right, fine, we'll put it on. And that's how it got on. Like, it's ridiculous. So you never know, but it was definitely a bummer. But there, there's new platforms popping up all the time. There's new opportunities, and we'll see how it goes.
Man, I look forward to it, bro. And I thank you so much for your time. We are friends, and I am proud to call you my friend. And I look forward, even though you are very far away from me. And I was talking to my wife the other day that I haven't seen you in well over a year, but those short conversations we have even if it's every month, I'm very happy for you, and I'm glad that you're a part of my life. And I look forward to the day we can drink some Dubco beers again. And I wish you nothing but the best and success. Thank you so much for your time. And everybody else, if you have not picked up the book, read about it, look it up. It is worth your time, and it is definitely going to change the outlook of your financial future. Until we see you on the next one, guys, have a good one.